Welcome back. When talking about inquiry-based learning, it will concern questions related to research-based teaching and learning. One way of understanding research-based teaching and learning is as a way of inviting students to become researchers in a sense. The practices used in the research are thus adopted by the students. This means, among other things, that they are given tasks where they critically examine the information they receive, formulate their own problems, compile research data, learn scientific methodology and analysis methods, and, towards the end, also learn how to carry out a research project. Put simply, the aim is to make them capable of conducting research, at least at a basic level. However, if the goal is to make a student into a researcher at a basic level, then it must be asked, does every student need to become a researcher? I ask the question, as not all programs necessarily have this explicit aspiration. While all courses can and should be research-based, not all subject areas are as strongly rooted in research as other subjects. However, if the goal is to make, likewise, when the research literature talks about inquiry-based learning, it is often equated with research practices. The phases that the student goes through in their inquiry are largely the same phases that a researcher goes through when doing research. For this reason, inquiry-based learning is also perceived to be compatible with a research-based approach to learning. Thus, inquiry-based learning aims to create students who have the insights into research and the ability to conduct research. But where does this leave those areas of higher education that do not have the same explicit aim of fostering those kinds of research skills? To answer that question, it must first be noted that education can still be research-based even if it does not explicitly aim to make students into researcher in their own right. For example, if the teaching is based on research literature or is rooted in teaching practices verified as effective by research, then the teaching is research-based. I've talked about this before, and I have a link to that lecture up here in the corner, so feel free to watch that lecture if you want to learn more about what I'm talking about right here. But to briefly summarize, according to Mick Healy's model, which he bases on Ron Griffith's research, much in teaching and learning can be research-based. As I also asked the viewer in those videos to observe, it is worth noting that only one category is described as research-based. However, I argued that all these elements are an expression of research-based teaching and learning. As I've said, if you teach the latest research, as in the bottom left corner here, then your teaching is research-based. If you have students read and reflect on research literature on their own work, as in the top left corner, then your teaching is research-based. And if you teach about how knowledge is produced in your subject area, as in the bottom corner on the right, then your teaching is research-based. So, although the purpose of the teaching or of a subject area is not to create researchers, the teaching can still be research-based. Second, it is also worth mentioning that from a Swedish perspective at least, it is the norm that all students, regardless of their educational program, produce a final project of some kind, perhaps in the form of a dissertation or thesis. This final work is usually also expected to follow certain established criteria that are compatible with a research-based perspective, in the sense that it is produced according to basic research principles and processes. The finished work, therefore, largely resemble a research article, and sometimes they are even sufficiently well done to be published. Thus, although the ambition is not to train future researchers, students are introduced to the research process in a very concrete way, at least at the final stages of their studies. Third, we can also think that all areas of teaching should aim to make students into inquirers, which is a fundamental characteristic of researchers. Indeed, if we return to Healy's model, we see that inquiry is what students should be expected to achieve. Thus, inquiry describes the level that places the most emphasis on research processes and problems, and the most emphasis on student participation. Inquiry-based learning helps students then reach this level of learning where students become independent inquirers. In relation to this, I would like to ask a question then. What field of study does not want to train students to become independent inquirers? Let's say you don't want to train them to become researchers, but who would argue that they don't benefit from being independent inquirers? So, my point is that if we change the question from should all students become researchers to should all students become independent inquirers, it becomes more obvious to answer yes, at least in a Swedish context. So in the next video, I will show that inquiry-based learning contributes to such a process, so we'll see each other there. See you there.